Do you feel like she had immediate regret that, oh no, I didn't want this to happen, and now she's trying to talk them out of this arrest so that you can come back into the home?
Well, I think that she obviously didn't want me to leave. But at this point, she was essentially, I mean, she was giving them the details of, okay, here's what happened. And she laid out the full story and said that, she was angry. And she said that you should arrest me. And she actually told them that. She said, she realized at that point, which seeing me going away, going to jail, when she was the one that had done essentially the entire thing, that, something wrong was occurring and that she should have been the one. If anyone was taken out, it should have been her.
And the reputation that got damaged there was not hers, it was yours.
It was mine.
And it was what we read about in the paper, the Columbian, it was an entirely different story.
Right.
We're at a break point, so we have to break. Okay, welcome back. We're continuing the story here. You are arrested. You're sitting in the back of the police car, and the police. Was there one individual? How many police came?
There was 3 total. 2 were from Camas and 1 was a Clark County deputy.
Okay, and so all 3 of them are on the front porch talking to your wife at this point?
They're inside the house talking to her,
okay.
And I'm pretty much just sitting in the car waiting.
And you're thinking about, oh no.
All right, I'm thinking, this is great.
This
is not how I thought I was going to spend the weekend.
A public a person who wants to get elected to office.
Yes.
You tried to protect the reputation of your wife.
Right.
And in reality, what turned out, I remember reading that and I thinking, oh, and I believed in the guy. And like, oh, his political future is over because this domestic guy, wife beater guy, is beating up his wife at home. That's what I thought. That was the impression that was left. In reality, this is not just a story about you and about what happened to you. This is really an eye-opening experience for the community to be able to understand that when you have domestic violence, it's not always the husband beating up on the wife. In this case, this was an entirely different story. So there's some insight that we can gain from this.
And there is. And when he came out, actually, after he had spoken with my wife the second time, he came outside and he said, look, and he basically broke it down for me. He said, here's how the situation works. He said, in Clark County, we have a policy. We must arrest on every single DV call. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He said,
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence, yes. He said, we have no discretion. We will make an arrest. He said, my only job here is to determine who the primary aggressor is and arrest that person.
So this be a word of caution to anyone who makes a call to 911 and says, reports a domestic violence case. They're sending somebody to jail. They're going to be arrested.
Someone's going
to
jail.
So they better think about that very carefully before they call.
Absolutely.
But there's a balance to that. You want to make sure you don't not call when it's appropriate. Right. There really is a threat going on.
Absolutely. And he's talking to me, having this discussion. And what he said to me was, he said, I have to make that assessment. He said, with the information your wife has given me, I could arrest her. He said, but there are children in the home. And because there's children in the home, I'm choosing to label you the primary aggressor. So knowing full well that she actually attacked me, knowing that she admitted it, which never made its way into the police report, that admission, knowing that she had showed him the chair she swung, knowing that there was no marks on her, knowing that she had, admitted to everything that had transpired that night, he still said that because you're male, basically, I'm going to spare your wife and take you instead.
How could that not make it into the police report? Aren't they, the assumption is that they'll lay down the facts of what happened on this call, and they went in, they talked with your wife, got the story from her. That never made it into the report. How can that be?
He omitted it for some reason. He never really explained. At the deposition, when he was discussing it, he did admit that she had said it, but he admitted as well, of course, that it didn't make its way into the police report somehow. And odds are it didn't meet the probable cause statement requirement, that he had probable cause to assume that I was the one that committed the attack. And so essentially, he had the same discussion with my wife. He talked to her inside, and he told her the exact same thing. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I have to take him. It's, and she said, wait a minute, I attacked him. And she said, look, there's kids in the house. He told her the same thing, and you should stay home with your children. My wife protested and said, but my husband is the one that takes care of the kids most of the time, because I'm the one that actually provides more care to our children. And he looked at her and said, well, mothers should stay home with their children.
Is that standard policy, or is that just an individual officer trying to, at the time, make a call?
I believe that was just his personal opinion, and he was letting that influence what was going on. And it obviously shouldn't have. And when we got down to the jail, he actually tried to console me, and he said, look, there's no evidence that you did anything, so you're going to be released by Monday morning. this is, of course, is Friday night, early Saturday. He said, Monday morning you'll go in before the judge and you'll be released, and this will be dropped right away.
So they booked you into a cell?
They booked me into Clark County. Yep, you sit in a cell. It's not a very nice cage. It's very Spartan. No clocks, nothing. You don't know anything. You don't talk to anyone. You don't have, of course, immediately there's not an attorney. It's basically you're not really given any information. You're just stuck in.
Did they? I assume this is your first experience behind bars. Did they take your clothes and put something else on you? Or?
Yep. You wear the blue garb like you're a criminal, even though you've never been convicted of anything. You're not, essentially you're given no information and, just put in there and most of them actually were quite kind. I found that down there, most of the guards and that kind of thing were pretty kind. There was a couple that weren't, but most of them were pretty relaxed. But essentially, the situation, you really have no information or know what's going on for the most part. And they decided to keep me there all the way till Monday, and then I didn't end up getting released until Monday at about 7:45
in the morning.
That evening. In the evening, yeah.
So you sat in jail
for 3 days.
For 3 days, thinking about this. What was going through your head?
Well, I did some writing down at the time, and at first, it was frustrating, knowing that here I am. I didn't do anything wrong. I was, that night I was trying to calm everything down. I was doing what they should actually teach what I did in the domestic violence class is what I was thinking. I was like, I did all of the steps. I stepped away to let her cool down. When I realized it was getting out of control, I was going to have a friend stay with her and take the kids and leave for the night. I was doing all of the things down the list, check mark. When she physically attacked, I restrained her, but I didn't use excessive force, and I released her as soon as she calmed down. It's basically, this is what, we should expect in that situation. But instead, I'm sitting in jail.
You're still together with your wife now.
Right.
I mean, so after you got out of jail, you went home?
Well, at first you can't. So what they do is and I found this out, these are kind of the dirty little secrets of the way domestic violence works. They get the case, and what they do is they put a no contact order almost every time in place, where you can't talk to your wife. You can't talk to, in some cases, depending, you can't talk to your kids, members of your family. You can't go home to your house. You can't, if you have a place of business that's at your home, you can't go there. So they make life extremely difficult. So we essentially were separated for over a month without even being able to communicate, nothing.
So in the meantime, you had a new phone. Your contacts were not in that new phone yet? You didn't have a computer, you didn't have the password to the computer?
Well, luckily she had changed the password to the computer, and she had arranged through the prosecution's office that she would leave the home and I would take over the home because I had all my business stuff there, and she had relatives in town that she could stay with. So that's kind of what we did to make the thing work, but in a lot of cases, it doesn't work that easily. In a lot of cases, I feel bad for the guys that don't have that situation where, they're immediately taken away from their kids. And if you remember my ex that we talked about earlier, she immediately exploited the opportunity, went into court and filed a restraining order, preventing me from seeing my son because of the accusation. And this is something that's also not talked about, is how a guy, as soon as you're accused, doesn't matter if there's evidence, doesn't matter anything, they can immediately go in and they will take your own kids from you while you go through the trial. And as they found out, of course, later, I was the victim of the actual attack, but I was the one that's having my kids taken from me, and everything else was associated with it simply because I was male. And this is something that happens typically. Now, the prosecutor, you have to realize in this case, he knew all of this. None of this was new to him. None of it was, we had the depositions, we had the statement. My wife was deposed, and she came in and told him the whole thing, what she had done, why she had done it, offered the phone records, offered the medical records to show the medication she was on, everything. He knew every single detail of it with no evidence whatsoever, and yet still proceeded all the way to trial.
So your wife did not press charges?
Nope.
Who's pressing charges?
It was the government, the county government.
So if you have domestic violence, whatever, the government come in and they can press charges, and that's what they did.
That's exactly what they did. And
in the meantime, you're home alone.
Right.
She's off at a hotel with her children, and you're not able to contact her during that time for the month.
Right. So what typically happens, this happens a lot, and what will happen is the guys will plea, and they will simply say, I'll take the diversion, I'll pay the fine, and I will, just to make it go away. What
do you mean diversion?
Diversion is offered to you generally by the prosecution's office, and it's a class. Basically, you pay a fine, you agree that you won't get found guilty, and it doesn't go on your official record, but you're on probation. I believe it's some kind of probation for a year, and you have to take a series of classes that you pay for that is offered through some kind of either state or local program.
So it's some admission of guilt to a lesser degree.
Essentially.
It's still in a position, you had just run for office, you're still hoping to run for office, And still, that's something that doesn't look very good. Some admission of guilt that, yeah, this was, I had my part in this. I,
Right.
was violent toward my wife.
Yeah, and that's how it would be seen, and that's essentially, what the perception would be, and it's
So you didn't do that?
Oh, absolutely not. And in most cases, guys do, because you have to realize you're pulled from most cases they're pulled from their home. Sometimes they can't do business. Sometimes they can't. It's easier to take the diversion punishment and to make all the rest of it go away. And what happens is the more of this, and there's federal programs that actually give funding to local governments if they increase the diversion rate because they're giving counseling for domestic violence. And so this is kind of a racket that's being run. We're paying taxes to the federal government, which is then giving money to a lot of the local community groups if they increase the rate of people going to diversion. They actually I wasn't even out of jail before I got the diversion offer, essentially a plea deal from the prosecutor. That's how quick it happens. It was that fast. I was just handed it.
So it's a form of plea bargaining?
It's essentially a kind of plea bargaining. And I don't know officially, I'm not a lawyer, if they would refer to it that way, but effectively that's what it is. You're agreeing to take a deal, to take these diversion classes, pay the fine, stay clean for a year and not do anything wrong, and then it doesn't go on your criminal record, doesn't go anywhere, it disappears from that point forward.
And what were the charges?
On mine it was domestic violence 4, which is the lowest level one they can give you. It was essentially assault 4, I believe is what they called it. And once they realized, once they had got all this information, in most cases when they said, okay, the guy's not taking the diversion and we have no evidence whatsoever, they would have dropped it. Now, remember in my case, like I said, every piece of evidence showed, from the phone records to the stuff that's destroyed at the house to the down to the medical reports and who was drinking and who wasn't, and everything showed that I was the victim in this case. And yet still with no evidence, not one piece of actual evidence, nothing. They took it all the way to trial in my case. Now, whether or not that was politically motivated, I think we can all assume pretty well that there's a young Tea Party guy, and some people don't like him, and they don't like that he says what he thinks and that he's actually honest on stage, and maybe this is a way to finally shut him up, even though they know full well that he's the victim of this crime. And it was proceeded all the way through that trial and literally it was interesting at trial because our defense consisted of 3 words: the defense rests. We literally had nothing to defend against because they hadn't put one shred of evidence forward. There was nothing to do. So that was our entire defense, and the case was over right there. Most of the jurors were rolling their eyes or looking at the prosecutor like, are you crazy? Are we really here? You didn't put one shred of evidence forward that this guy had done anything.
Was your wife interviewed on the stand during that time? She was,
and she told the whole story exactly how it happened.
So during that time, she was defending you?
Absolutely, yes. And they didn't have a witness that was going to say what they wanted, essentially. They had one that was saying the same story that she had told at the end of the first night when she had admitted exactly what had really happened and what had transpired. That was backed up. We didn't even bother putting in all of our evidence, even putting the phone record in. We didn't do any of that because we didn't have to. That's how simple it was. And the jury had 15 pages of instructions to read. I believe it was 15. And in less than 30 minutes, they had read through, analyzed the 15 pages of instructions, and come back with a unanimous verdict. So
Which was?
It was not guilty. So that's how simple it was.
And could you then go, you and your wife could be in contact again, you could go back home, and you did?
Well, we did, and we had it released. We had the no contact actually was rescinded about halfway through. It was released earlier in the process. You can go back before the judge and request it, and the judge can remove it or not remove it. In our case, he did. He chose to. In some cases, he doesn't. And, which is another way that a lot of people end up getting convictions on these things, even if they haven't committed domestic violence, is because what will happen is they'll put a no contact in place, you get caught violating it, and now you're going to have to plea because they have you on something else. And that happens all of the time. So that's used as a weapon. And also, the statistics on this. Since this happened to me, I began looking at statistics, and what I quickly found was that in cases of domestic violence, actually, most of the research, this is California State research, this is big colleges, over 500 studies of empirical peer-reviewed studies showed that males are actually the victim equal to females, if not the majority of the time domestic violence occurs. It's actually, unlike what we see on Lifetime movies and in Clark County courts, males are actually victims of domestic violence more often than their perpetrators.
Which is something you don't normally read about in the paper.
You don't.
We're at a break point. We need to be able to break now, and we'll start in again in a minute.